Scary.
Always export the chat. Monitor and sharing your screen and everything here.
Yeah, Tony's listed as co-host only.
Yeah, I don't seem to have the ability to.
All right, I'll fix it later. Well, anyway, our first announcement for the evening is you need to get your tickets to go see Claris lead singer and evangelist Rockin' Rick Kalman. He's going to perform live at DIGFM Zoom Theater on June 6th. Claris is promoting their Journey's latest hit single. What's that? FMXXVI. I think that's formerly known as FileMaker 23. I don't know anything else about it except what CEO Ryan McCann teased us with on the Claris site. You guys can look that up. Just go to Claris site. I think it's a banner up at the top there. And if anyone, I don't know if anyone can tell us more of what kind of presentation we're in for next month, feel free to share that right now because I'm not one of those Claris partners or I'm not Rick Kalman. Anything? Can you tell us anything what we're going to be looking forward to, Rick?
So what date did you say that was?
That's next month, right?
Right.
June 6th? Is that too early?
6th? Yes, that's too early. But I thought I saw June 11th down there.
Oh,
Yeah,
maybe.
June
Oh,
11th.
no, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It's June 11th.
Yeah.
It's the second Thursday.
Yes.
So it can't be the 6th.
So I can talk to you about the latest and greatest release and how it relates to what Ryan McCann announced last Tuesday morning.
All right.
So stay tuned.
All right. What else? Oh, yeah. Speaking of Rockin' Rick Kalman, he's one of the many rock stars you're going to expect to see at Engage 26. But there's not going to be an Engage 26. So John Howell and his fellow concert organizers are putting together the Woodstock of FileMaker conferences this year instead. It's going to be Engage Fix for your Engage Fix for 26. The full access FileMaker conference in lovely Los Altos, California. Look at that. 5 daring days, 4 wild and wacky August nights, room and food included for one low price, one of those tiers there. And if that price isn't low enough for you already, DIGFM has a special promotion just for you. I'll put it in the chat later unless somebody else wants to do that, but it's FA26 DIGFM1, and that'll get you a $200 DIGFM discount.
Don't forget the free alcohol, ping pong, and game show nights. All booze free included.
I wasn't going to mention those, but anyway, yes. We'll have to card you though for the ping pong. And let's see. Oh, and you can thank us by subscribing to the DIGFM YouTube channel because that would boost our reach a little bit if we could get up to 500 subscribers. So let's look at the latest on the Full Access website. Let's see. What do we got here? Oh, look, you can register without even looking at the rest of the website, which is what most of these people did already. Most of the people who went last year just came here and registered again without even bothering to look at what kind of things we have here. We have the venue. That's a beautiful venue. It's up on the hills, and it's practically overlooking Claris headquarters just a few miles away. You probably can't see it through all the trees, but it's over there somewhere. What else we have? Featured sessions. You guys can look at those later. That some of the superheroes of the FileMaker platform are delivering all those. And there's a YouTube channel that John set up. It's got all kinds of like personal promotions that he's been recording lately, and they give you a really personal touch on some of the people who've attended before and who plan on attending, like Christian there. What else do we got? Oh, highlights from last year. You could look at that.
36 videos on the YouTube channel so far.
You're a busy guy. And what else do we have here? Oh, all our sponsors and contributors. Not only do these sponsors help make FileMaker what we enjoy today, but they're contributing to your enjoyment in August. And I want to point out one contributor in particular, and I'm going to say RGC Data. They're almost entirely responsible for the FileMaker database and WordPress website features you see here today. And you're going to see more features added to this site pretty soon. If you wanted help organizing a conference site, I think I'd talk to these guys because their development is just growing leaps and bounds as they're helping put this up. And what else do we have? Oh, yeah, down here, it's not too late to become a sponsor. Join that who's list up there. What else we got at the top? We've got you can look at last year's if you want, FA 2025. You want to see how that went. This is just going to be better than last year. So if you want to see what a blast we were having, that's there. A new feature they recently added was this map, right? This was cool. Like one of our organizing meetings, they set this so you don't get lost because there are trails and stuff out there. A few buildings like a conference center might have, and then and it even has a "You Are Here" option here, but I'm not there right now. This is going to be functional later on.
Oh, Alex was telling me about building this. This is RGC's work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, who's that? Who's talking?
Oh, Mike Cupid's. Hi.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that's a pretty cool feature, and I'm trying to talk him into actually having my face pop there when I'm here. But anyway.
We're going to have to get a special map icon to point where the coolers are with all the alcohol.
Yeah. Let's see. What else we got on there? We got the map. Attending. Who do we got attending? By the way, there's session schedules and calendars are there. There's even Vince asked for that. Yeah, I'll show that real quick. Sessions. Come on. Oh, my site's slow now. Okay, sessions. Schedule. Calendar. Oh my. Is that what you asked for, Vince?
What's your question?
Yes. Thank you. Awesome.
I think he's going to be adding feature to that as well. So anyway, back with the attending, let's just take a look at who's attending. I'm not going to read all the names you should know already, but I'm going to point out a few who are going to appear on DIGFM this year. We've got Rick Kalman coming up next month. And then later on, Clay Makel. What else we got here? David Simpson, Christian Schmitz, Geist, and Proof, another guy, Eric Luce from Proof. And I think, who we have? Oh, yeah, Kevin. Well, we already had Kevin Frank this year at DIGFM, but we also have Darren Terry coming. And Darren Terry, he's revamping his famous and much discussed presentation, Shaking the Dependency Tree, and presenting it at full access. Not only are they all past and future DIGFM 2026 presenters, and all of them are contributing to full access sessions, but if you don't think you have, or you can have full access yet, I would be looking forward to, let's get back over here, to yet another conference. We're going to be calling that the Read Only DIGFM Hybrid Concert. And that overlaps with full access. Let's see if, I don't know if I passed all this through John yet, at least not the wording of this, but he does know we are doing some simulcast. We're actually, well, I'll just explain this. It says, yeah, so you're going to be able to attend in person, of course, but we're going to be sharing some of the sessions. So yes, again, fullaccess.us, you can get that discount code and share that there. But I lost my spot. But yeah, we're going to be some of those people I just mentioned, like Darren Terry, Christian, Todd Geist, and the Under the Hood sessions. those are some of the ones that we're going to be broadcasting out to our DIGFM audience. It'll be August 6th through 9th, 3 to 6 p.m. All right, of course, now really want you there in person because that is actually the full experience. But if you put this on your calendar, we got 4 meetups in a row, one day after the other for all of you. And that's free for you online. But again, it's kind of like the equivalent of read-only access compared to full access. And that's all the announcements I have for now.
Hey, Eric, you turned it off already, but sorry. I just refreshed the website. I put Vince's session on the featured list, so now it instantly shows on the homepage. We all do that directly from FileMaker, which is pretty cool.
And speaking of conferences, our special guest tonight is David Hidd, and he is helping organize a conference out on the whole hemisphere. He's organizing it for. So take it away.
Thanks very much. Just mentioning the Reconnect conference. This will be our 4th conference. We've been in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane so far. Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, the actual order. And now we're heading off to the land of the long white cloud, to New Zealand. So this year in October, we'll be in New Zealand. The organisers just spent some time over there last month now, just checking out the venues for the conference and also for the social evening, and everything is looking really good for that. So if you have been yearning to see New Zealand, it's a great opportunity to come down, do a bit of FileMaker, and then travel the world of New Zealand and check out some of their amazing wines and amazing vistas in New Zealand. It's a really fantastic place to visit, so recommend it to everyone. So we have 152 days to go. And just today, we've opened up the call for speakers. So there is a Claris Studio form there that you can fill out to present at Reconnect, or simply to go to buy tickets and attend. So we'd love to see as many people from around the world there as we possibly can. We're already got a lot of people coming, so it's going to be a great conference. So there you go. All right, so on with the presentation today. Thank you very much for the invitation to present today, and thanks for everyone for attending. What I am going to be looking at today, as the marketing said, is a rev on my original session of Stop Making Sense, and that is Still Making Sense. And what we're going to be looking at today is what I've started off with, and that is a new product called Script Logic. And this is all about writing FileMaker scripts and writing better FileMaker scripts. So the whole thing here is that when people come to FileMaker, they start to learn about FileMaker, and then they discover scripting, and they find out that scripting is really the heart of what FileMaker is all about. And I think it's to a large extent, it's one of the biggest nuggets in FileMaker that really makes FileMaker what it is, where people can actually apply real programming principles, but not have to do the typing sort of programming side of things. And that's not a bad thing. It just means that your scripting goes a lot faster. The interesting thing about that, also from the point of view of experienced developers, is the question about what was the last thing that you learned about scripting, or do you think that you're done with scripting? I mean, is it just a one and done thing that you've basically been using it for years and now you know how to do scripting, and so it's just basically you do scripting? My personal bent is that everyone should be a lifelong learner. There is always something to learn. There's always something else that you can learn about everything, let alone FileMaker scripting. To put that in perspective, obviously when writing stuff with script logic, I go off and do a lot of research about what scripting is and how things work, and discover stuff along the way. I read people's blogs and I read the FileMaker help documentation and various things on the FileMaker community and in FM Slug and all these sort of things that people are writing about. And along the way, I learn more stuff about scripting. And part of the reason behind script logic was to actually put that stuff out into the public space and get other people to be as enthusiastic about learning new things. So I can turn that question on myself and say, what was the last thing that you learned about scripting? And the answer is this script step. Now, I preface this with saying that, no, I probably haven't used transactions as much as I should in my scripting in recent years. And I can argue that this was only introduced in FileMaker 21, which is, I don't know what that 20 is, that 2023 or 2022? I don't know what they matched up with. I'm going to be very excited when FileMaker 26 comes out and it's version 26. So I didn't actually know that this script step even existed, and therefore I didn't actually know what it did. So then I went down the rabbit hole 3 hours later, reading people's blogs and reading things about this and writing scripts and finding out about it and working out what it was about, how it worked, and why you would use it in a script. The interesting thing then is that it turned up in one of the script logic email posts where we ended up with it in looking at why a transaction rolled back and trying to communicate to the user about what actually went wrong with that transaction. And it turned out that I actually needed that script step to actually make that reporting actually work properly. So there you go. I learned something in the last couple of days about FileMaker scripting that I didn't actually know before. So hopefully it is the same for other people. Even very, very experienced developers can learn things all the time. And obviously when FileMaker 2026 comes out, there are going to be new script steps in there. Pushing towards things in AI, there'll be new functions in there, and it's certainly something that you should spend some time on, having a look at these things, and not only saying, tick, 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 I know all the new things that are there, but actually spending some time and trying to work out how things really work. And that's where things start making sense. My history is that I've been using FileMaker for way too many years. I picked up FileMaker first in 1989, so when I was about 3. So I've been developing in FileMaker and teaching about FileMaker since then. Along the way, I spent a few years as the systems engineer for FileMaker in the Asia Pacific region and got a sort of a look inside the company as well. And then, things like COVID happened, training was going gangbusters, COVID happened, and then basically everything died and people discovered, online training and things. So script logic is part of that. The idea of script logic is that with the email side of things, you can spend a couple of minutes each day having a look at things that I decide to push out. But also there is the subscription side of things where we can have a look at web lessons, PDF files, videos, demo files. There'll be office hours for subscribers, the offer of a script teardown. So when you actually subscribe to this, which also say, please don't subscribe at the moment, because there's nothing to subscribe to at this stage apart from the free setup. So this would be the free setup, which is Be Curious, and it just gives you an idea of what Script Logic is going to be all about. And when you look at some of these lessons, there'll be obviously information about these. There'll be videos on here, the text behind it. There'll be downloadable PDFs and also downloadable demo files where it's appropriate. All of these things are going to be categorized into the various sort of areas, like whether they're basics or whether they're best practice or something like that. They'll also be categorized in terms of the different levels that they are. So it might be easy peasy, it might be a brain stretcher, it might be the script genius type of stuff. So as a result of that, in the Be Curious free subscription, there are things in here where we look at things like creating and destroying variables. This is a process, and we're looking at this being a bit tricky. Not hard, but just something that you need to understand, and there are some tricky things in there. Along the way in the subscription, there are also quizzes that you can take. So you can sort of test your knowledge as to what you've actually read and whether you actually understand it and see that. So hopefully that will be something that comes out in the next few months. There's a lot of work behind that. As you might expect, I have spent quite some time trying to get all of this stuff together, and also all of it is sitting in a FileMaker database at the moment. So I have 114 topics in here which need to be fleshed out and put into the Script Logic stuff. But along the way, what I decided to get started with was some daily writing, and that led to Script Logic as an email subscription. So what I've been doing for the last 30 odd business days is pushing out these FileMaker Script Logic daily emails, and you can go to scriptlogic.kit.com to subscribe. And if you go to scriptlogic.kit.com/posts, you'll get access to all of the posts that have been done for the last 30 odd days. So that's what Script Logic is all about. The idea of Script Logic is that what I want to encourage amongst the FileMaker community, from brand new developers right through to old crusty developers like me, is that you strive for creating better scripts every day. And the goals of better scripting are creating scripts that have readable code. So what we want to do when we create a script is to write something that you can go back to next week in 6 months' time, and you can look at it from the start, read through that code and say, yeah, I get what it's doing. I can understand what it's doing. It will not take you 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour to try and work out how smart you were when you actually wrote that. As a result of that, if possible, your script should be self-documenting, so that it actually reads as a story and it is documenting itself as you go through that. It should also be performant. So you strive to create a script that actually operates in the most efficient manner and actually does the job in as small amount of time as possible, and with all of the best sort of practices in terms of writing that script. Of course, your script should also be as bulletproof as possible. So you should always have thought about what could go wrong with this script. And that, by the way, is a really good question to ask AI at this stage, to be able to say, if you can get your script, copy and paste it and put it into AI and ask AI, well, what could possibly go wrong with this? You'll get some really interesting answers from that. And the last thing that you should look at with your scripts is to make them justifiable in terms of the way that your scripts are actually written. What you should be able to do, and what I'm continually doing when I'm scripting, is having someone look over my shoulder and say, why did you do it that way? Why did you put that script step in there? Why didn't you do this instead? And so if you're second guessing a lot of your scripting, you're justifying the way that you're actually doing it. And you're saying that does make sense to do it that way because of X, Y, and Z. So I would certainly welcome if people have any questions or comments or opinions along the way. One of the things we said in the marketing materials is that, for this particular session, I would encourage you to bring your opinions, and I'd encourage you to argue your opinions. And that's what's important about that. Everyone can have an opinion, but you should be able to defend your opinion when you put it out there into the world. And hopefully that's one of the things that I am doing in Script Logic, in the emails that get sent out every day. Not only do I actually put things in there and say, I believe that this is the way that you should do things, but hopefully I support that argument as well. So let's start with something that's a little less controversial than some of the other things that we might cover. And this was the very first email that I put out. And it was looking at naming parameters. And the idea here is that when you name the parameters, you should give them a good name. One of the things that I shouldn't say hate because that's a strong word, but one of the things that I really question when I look at someone's script is when they've used all of these parameters that are either one letter, I or J or N or something like that, or they are parameters that are abbreviations of something. They might be, instead of writing out 3 words, they're 3 letters. So they've abbreviated to that. What I would encourage you to do is to say when you create parameters, give them proper names. So give them proper names like save or cancel rather than S or C. Give them proper names when you're building parameters into loops and things like that. I see a lot of people use I in a loop, and I suppose that comes from a background in programming where people say, well, you should just use I because everyone uses I in C++ programming. But the question is, what does I actually stand for? And the fact is that it stands for index, an incrementing index that happens through a loop, for example. So why not use the word index? But also then we go one step further and saying, what is it that you're actually counting through? Are you counting through the records, or are you counting through the fields, or are you counting through the number of things that you want to create? I don't know what you're counting through. So maybe index isn't the right word for that. So the other thing that comes up there is that when people use I and then they have a loop within a loop, they say, well, I need another index. So I don't know what I need to call it. I know, I'll call it J because that's the next letter in the alphabet. If you're looping through a loop, why don't you call it index of bikes? And then your inner loop is going to be index parts. So there is absolutely no downside to having a longer variable name than just a letter. And it is in that vein, that goal of self-documenting code where you go, yep, when I read that, I understand what it is you're adding one to all the way through. So, I suppose I open up the question to the audience. Does this make sense? Is it something that you subscribe to? Or do you write all of your code so that it's obscured with one-letter variables?
Well, I totally agree. In fact, because I came from C++. Well, not C, no, pre-C++. I came from C programming, just the basic C programming. All the books had I, J, K, plus, and
Yes.
for your increments. And it's kind of weird when I got into FileMaker, it just kind of like, the examples typically used full names for increments, and I just, I kind of went wild with it, right? Because you put almost anything for a field name, and maybe it went a little bit too far. But yes, it was just, but you could be very descriptive and not limited by spaces and capitalization and all kinds of other things.
Exactly.
I agree. I agree. I get into scripts that are easily 2,000 lines long, and I may have 3 or 4 or 5 loops that are nested. And if I get down to line 1,200, I don't remember what the heck an I stands for or a J. So even when I'm incrementing counters and counts, I'll actually, if I JSON list count, based on JSON list counter, I will give them such explicit long names, because who cares that I will never forget the intention or the context.
And that's a good point as well. I mean, the word intention is important in the sort of scripting that I subscribe to as well, and that is that things should be written at the level of intention, where you say, all right, I record my intention at this point. I wrote this script in May of 2026, and at the time, I intended this to be the case. I intended this to happen, and this is how I wrote it. And then you can come back to it in May of 2027, and you go, that may have been your intention, but you've actually messed it up just here. So I understand what you intended to do. I understand how you messed it up, and so I'm going to fix it now. So it's a really good thing about writing code, not only writing scripts.
Maybe an argument in the opposite direction is like sometimes my table name plus field name is really big to be using over and over again, and in my opinion makes some calculations unreadable, because this calculation gets kind of really long, and it's kind of nice to use an abbreviated variable name, still readable, but something abbreviated, so it condenses the calculation by not having to say the same field name, table name over and over and over again.
That brings in the value of script annotation. Every 2 or 3 or 4 lines, I've got a comment that'll be like the year, reverse order, year, month, day, my name, the intention of that. And if it gets changed, and there's another line added, this was edited to adjust da-da-da-da. Another line, this script param is just called something short, but it means this. So very thorough documentation, so you can come back to it 10 years later and not be lost.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it comes down to, is the documentation along the way. I agree that, I look at people who are using anchor buoy or anchor buoy techniques, and those table names or those table occurrence names by default actually become quite long. And I would agree that there's a trade-off between a 1-letter and a 40-letter variable name. So somewhere in the middle is that sweet spot in terms of being documenting enough to be able to understand what the intention was in 6 months' time, and not overdoing it. All right, let's go on to something a little controversial. Years and years ago, I wrote an article for FileMaker magazine that obviously doesn't exist anymore, and talked about the use of allow user abort and set error capture on. And I actually went through all of this with a few of these things. One of the important things I think about FileMaker scripting is that you need to understand how FileMaker works, and you need to understand how script steps work. And that's more than, as I say, just ticking it off and saying, yeah, I know that one exists. One of my tasks while I was the systems engineer for FileMaker was I was part of the writing team for the certification exams that we used to have. And that was a totally eye-opening experience in terms of the effort that went into writing those exams. But I also taught
It was fun, wasn't it, David?
I'm sorry?
I said that was a whole lot of fun, wasn't it?
It was the best time, the
Locked in
absolute
that
best time.
conference room for a week.
Yes, yeah. Locked up in a conference room. I also went on to do training courses in certification where people wanted to pass the certification exam. And my approach with those training courses was not necessarily come along here, I'll tell you what's in the exam, I'll tell you what all the answers are, so you'll be able to go off and pass the exam. My approach as a teacher was to say that probably 70% of what I'm going to teach you in the next few days is in the exam. 30% of it is definitely not in the exam. I know it's not there, but it is stuff that you should know if you're going to be a good developer. And a large push within those courses was not understanding how, what was there in FileMaker. It was understanding how it works. And so that was the sort of starting point for this particular post was looking at set error capture and what set error capture does. So, the question is, does it if you turn error capture on, does that mean that the errors actually get captured in some place, or do they get captured and therefore stopped from happening? And the answer is none of those are correct. You go through and have a look at what the FileMaker help does, and then what does that actually mean for the script? So it's important not just to understand that set error capture is there, it's important to understand exactly how it works. And my bugbear, and the thing that I'd like to wipe from the world, is the people who turn set error capture on at the start of every script. And when I ask people why they do that, they say it's because this person told me that that's what I was supposed to do. And years ago, there was a trainer who came down to Australia and did some training courses, and their thing was that the first two steps in every script that you write should be set error capture on and turn user abort off. And then you start writing a script. And I think my opinion is that nothing should be further from the truth. It's the wrong thing to do, and you really should be being, I've had an argument with AI about this, asked them to justify why they did it all the time. And I think it's because their body of knowledge is big enough that, there are so many people out there doing it. And we came to a conclusion in the end that the AI called my scripting surgical scripting, where they said that what you're doing is you're not just throwing a blanket over everything and saying everything should be error capture on. What you're doing is you're actually picking out a small part of your script where the error capture should be turned on, and then after that, you're turning it off again. So the big example, of course, is when you get that stupid error message that comes up, none of the records match your request. So you write a script, you do a perform find in there at some stage. Sometimes it finds no records. So FileMaker helpfully pushes out that error message that says none of the records match your request. From the user's point of view, when they run that script, they press this button that says, something like, run the daily sales report, and it comes back and says, none of the records match your request. And they go, well, where's my sales report then? So the point is that the generic FileMaker error message makes no sense to them. So what we do is we turn error capture on, we perform the find, and we turn the error capture off. And by doing that, what we're doing is for that particular script step, we are taking total responsibility for what might happen. So there are lots of things that might happen. The most common thing that might happen is that there are no records that match that request. So we can do a lot of things. We can, push a message back to the user that actually makes sense and says something like, in this sales report, unfortunately, there were no sales today. You probably know that because you've been sitting all day in your shop twiddling your thumbs and no one's come in, but there are no sales today to report, so I have no report for you. And that makes a lot more sense, obviously, to the user than no records match your request. So my practice is that I never turn error capture on unless I need it. So if there is something coming up on the script which will possibly push out an error that the user won't understand, I'll turn error capture on, and then at the end of it, I will turn error capture off. The important thing here also is that error capture, firstly, doesn't stop errors from happening, but it also doesn't stop a lot of things going on. It's only there to actually stop these generic FileMaker messages. And there are a lot of errors that happen that don't generate FileMaker error messages. So it has no impact on them at all, whether you have it on or off. So let's open that up. Is this controversial? Am I?
Well, I got a real simple.
You should really turn it on all the time.
David, first of all, I don't know why they call it error capture. Should have been called error suppression because it doesn't capture anything, right? So that's like the first red flag. The whole function is erroneously named, and that's why people think it does some capturing for them, and we know it doesn't, right?
Well, it captures the error number. I mean,
yes,
something you can use to debug, so it does capture something from a developer point of view.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't actually capture, does it? It doesn't capture anything. As John said, and I think I said in one of these things, I'm trying to find it, but all it does is suppress an error dialogue. And that's the whole thing.
I suppose, you could do the get last error with or without the capture on.
Yeah, the capture on, it means it does get held in RAM somewhere, but you don't know where it is until you go get it.
Yeah. Right. So it doesn't actually stop the error. It doesn't capture it anywhere. Unless you get last error, you don't actually even know what it was. I think this might be something for Rick Kelman to say, this is the wrong name for this.
Feature request, Rick.
Vince?
Hey, just a quick comment about this. One of my also longtime pet peeves is that I don't want to write code that's hard to grok and it's inflated. A long time ago when I lived in Arizona, I took a Java class, and one of the most interesting things was, well, two things that I found amazing about that class. First off, the speed was mind-blowing. There was an exercise to write, I think it was a document that had 10 columns and 1,000 rows, and each cell, think of it like an Excel document, and each cell was some really hard, complicated Fibonacci number or something like that. And then when you finished it and you ran it, and I ran it, I said, I think it's not working. The teacher said, why? Well, because it doesn't, kind of work. It doesn't run. He says, what do you mean it doesn't run? You've got output. Every time you clicked it, it generated output. You're kidding me. It generated that just like as milliseconds. Is mind blowing, right? And then he says, if you want to debug it, just turn on, the debugger, and what you get is every single statement gets logged. Every single statement. So you'll get the statement, you'll get the amount of time it took to execute that statement, the error that it got back, etc. And I did not have to modify my code at all, right? So I could put it in this debug state, and I could just look at it. And so think of so many systems that imagine if we had kind of a way to do automated testing, and then you just run it, and all the, and if you got this system where it's just logging errors and it's watching for any errors that show up, then all of a sudden you just, go and hammer those down, right? So I would love to see situations where if we use this feature to suppress an error, not only are we suppressing the dialogue, but you're also knowing that you don't want the error to get logged. So you're suppressing also the writing of that error to the log, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's a kind of like maybe a missing piece to this. But I would love to see code where you don't have to write and capture for all the pessimistic outcomes, because otherwise you can't see the code for you can't see the trees for the forest.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what happens sometimes in the code when people say, well, what if this happened? What if that happened? What if that happened? You go, well, that's never going to happen. So I don't need to write code for that. I had someone doing some code for me at one stage, and I said, what's this code in here for? Getting him to justify his coding. And he said, that's in case I made a mistake. I said, all right, well, let's just delete that, because you're not going to make mistakes like that, because you're going to test your code properly, and therefore you don't need that in there to actually test if you make that mistake. Darren.
I just wanted to cycle back to a point. I am someone who's taken David's courses, and that moment, and I think it was a FileMaker 17 certification, and that stayed with me. That statement of being not just understanding a script step, but to be able to try more than one way to write that same script, to be curious as to how and what options you have. And yes, I went on to pass the certification, and most of the time I passed or failed by 2 questions anyway, so it really didn't matter. And it was that opportunity to sit with David and other people and just really pull apart a script step like he's doing here, but to understand our platform. And that really stayed with me. So I just wanted to, just as someone who's taken David's courses, really think about what your audience is for that script. Are you writing it so another senior developer can read that script? Are you writing it so that you can hand it across to an intern or a medium level developer? And in this day, are you handing it across to AI to be able to understand what that script does? And we talk about context. Who's going to be viewing this script in 6 months' time? Is it going to be yourself? You're going to read it and understand, why is this happening? Why am I getting this function, where it's going? So I just want to go back on that one point to say that stayed with me, and it still stays with me today. And a lot of the developer experience stuff that I talk about comes from that moment of saying, be curious, do it 3 different ways, and understand the audience who's going to read your script.
Yeah,
excellent.
I would add in there that it's important to, when you struggle with a script step and you get it done, that's a good time to say, how else could I have done this? Because if you can't think of a second way, then you can't pick the best way.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the point that I sometimes make. I'm mentoring people at the moment, and one of the things I do in mentoring is to say, good, we got the solution. That actually works. It does what it does. That's good. Now, I want you now to go away and find 2 other ways to do exactly that same thing. And they go, why? Why are we wasting time? We've already done the thing. And go, yes, but we want to find a better way of doing that. And the only way that you're going to do that is to throw your assumptions out about how it's supposed to be done and do it again a different way. And then say, all right, so now I've got these 3 different ways of doing the same thing. Which one am I going to stay with? Which one I'm going to stick to? And it is a big challenge sometimes to actually get things done a different way. and to find a different way of doing something. And that's where you move to the next level in your scripting, is to try and challenge yourself to do something differently. It brings up an interesting point about my arguments with AI, and it's where we're getting to with a lot of this AI stuff, and the stuff that Claris are going to be releasing hopefully in the next little while. They've teased us a little bit about agentic scripting and things like that, but I'm still on the fence about whether Gemini can actually do my job, and I honestly believe that I'm a far, far better scripter than AI is at the moment, at least. The argument that I had just the other day was about this there was a transactional sort of thing that I was writing, and they said, inside the transaction, what you can do is you can have your duplicate record request step, and if that goes wrong, you actually do this. You just say, if the get last error wasn't 0, then revert the transaction, blah blah blah. And it turns out that when you do a transaction and something goes wrong with this script step, that you never get to this script step because the transaction just rolled back. And I won't go through the argument that we had, but AI was saying, no, that's fine. You should be able to do that. And then you say, but what happens when this duplicate record fails? It just rolls back and it jumps straight down to the commit transaction step. And then, of course, AI comes back and says, oh, you're absolutely right. Sorry, I should have pointed that out. And you're going, so all of this stuff that you've been telling me for the last 10 minutes actually is wrong. So let's go back and tell me what you're supposed to do at that point. And that's when it gets confused in itself. But then you get things like this. And you say there's a post-mortem here. When a transaction fails, FileMaker stores the Y inside a JSON object. Does it? You access this using get transaction error detail. Really? And I'm looking at this and I'm going, far out, there's something else that I don't know about FileMaker. They introduced some function at some stage called transaction error detail, and I haven't been using that, and this would be really good. You can, it's a goldmine for developers. It doesn't, it gives you all, good, I'll go and have a look at it. And it turns out, anyone?
Doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. But we got all the way down here, and then you go, and I said, do you mean get error, last error location? Is that what you're talking about? And they go, oh, yes, it's an easy mistake to make because they were released around the same time, but they serve different purposes. They are siblings. So here is AI doubling down and saying, yeah, that exists, but there's also transaction error detail. This is the one you want. And this is what it does. It was introduced in 19.6 and specifically for this and blah, blah, blah. And this is why it wins. This is what you should be using it for. And this is really what you're good. And now it came back and said, no, get trans error detail does not exist. You go, you're absolutely right. All the biggest argument I've been talking to you about, it doesn't exist. I clearly need a coffee or a script debugger for my own brain. What I was actually talking about was get last error detail. So this is the frustrating thing for me about AI at the moment. And this is where someone mentioned in a previous thing, maybe we could get all of the script logic posts and pile them into an LLM somewhere and say, basically, this is the way I want you to write scripts and this is the way I want you to talk about things. Somehow, is there a way that we can get AI to actually question itself before it spews out all of this, hallucinating of functions and things? There's more argument in here about where it went wrong with things, and it said that you could get custom messages, and then I came back and said that you can only do custom messages for an explicit revert, of course, I'm absolutely right. Of course, rolling back implicitly, and that's when we got into that new script step. So it's an interesting thing where I sort of try and second guess myself when I'm writing the script logic stuff and say, is this real stuff? Is this going to be useful to people? And hopefully it is. But it's one of those things that goes that level above AI, where you're saying this is written by a real person, this has been researched by a real person, and these are the sorts of things that you should be thinking about.
Well,
David,
AI,
I think your tool is remarkable, and I think it also would be extraordinarily useful to feed into an AI model, because basically it's it's all about context, and once you get into where you've got your own MCP servers and you've got all of your own .md files, I found for every single script step, I've got it for every one of MBS's functions, every single thing that's been written, I have it on my drive. And so what I've done is I've gotten these looping kinds of things that you're talking about, where it'll write the script and then it'll examine it again, and then it'll examine it again. And we went through Sonnet. We use Claude exclusively. So we went through Sonnet and Sonnet 4.5 and 4.6, and we were getting real far. But I still ran into a context issue, so I ended up writing in Xcode something I called JSON chunker. And so I was feeding it in, megabytes full of JSON, and it couldn't handle it. So I chunked it. Anyway, I walked away a couple of times. I finally came back when Opus 4.6 came out, and then Opus 4.7. And now when you've got 1 million token context and you pay a couple $100 a month, but it can handle it. And you can write 800,000 line scripts that are perfect, dead on, and tested internally by a system. It works.
Yeah.
It works. It's amazing stuff. And I just think that we're on the edge of something where we're all going to become architects.
Well, except there's one problem, that LLMs are still always, at least right now, predictive text. They don't actually think algorithmically. They're not stateful, and they don't step through a process, look at what happens, have a conceptual model of what should happen, see what happens, compare, and then suss out the difference, which is how you program. They don't do that. So ultimately, all they're doing is and they do great. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely. You give them enough context, they do great. But the way they quote unquote think is fundamentally different. And that's why they always are going to miss. They don't have broad domain knowledge, even though you can fake it with predictive text trained on a lot of text. But they're always, the big problem I have with them is missing edge cases where they don't seem to hallucinate, and they come up with a really neat answer, and you put it into production, and then 6 weeks later an edge case comes up that kills the entire thing, and you're already in production, and you come back and it says, you're absolutely right.
It's like the one that says, is this poison? No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I do want to say, to push back a little bit on something that you said earlier, David, about, you don't want to put in those error catches because you're going to test your script. But you know what? Even as a human being, there's always going to be those edge cases. And for instance, this is a very broad example. I might have a script where you talked about running a report and it finds no records. You don't want to disturb the user with a strange technical error message. Let's say you as a programmer are writing a script that does a find, and you know in your head that there is no possible way that it will ever not find something. In the proper operation of this system, it's always going to come up with the answer. But you know what? Depending on the circumstance, I'm not saying this is always, but depending on the circumstance, I will sometimes still put in the error catch, and I will put in something where if it does come up with no records, it takes a bunch of it stores a bunch of environment variables and get messages, puts them in an error message, and tells the user, I'm really sorry, we've had a technical error, give this message to IT, give this to the dev team, and then lists out a chunk that they couldn't possibly understand. But at least this way, I get a complete report of the environment and what went into the script, all the variables that the script is using, and I don't have to rely on the user to tell me what they did, because I can get a snapshot. Just on the off chance that somewhere down the road there's an edge or corner case that I just didn't think of.
There used to be a big career profile they called business analysts, right? I think what's going to happen, you're going to have a whole generation of people's career profiles are going to be called edge case analysts.
Oh my God.
For AI. No. The rest of us are going to be architects and project managers. But I can see a whole career path of just edge case analysis.
Oh, I just want to build things.
Okay. One of the other things I'd like to look at is techniques for things and using things in different ways that people might not have thought of. Not that I'm going to put myself forward as the most innovative person in this space, but you look at things like this where you can use the script debugger in a different way. So the idea with this was that you look at this and you say, oh, what script does this button actually run? And the long way of doing it is obviously get into layout mode, double click the button, have a look down here, see find email status. It's got a parameter of sent. I can click on this button and then I can go in here and I can edit the button, edit the script, and I can go and have a read of the script. So that's a lot of clicks to actually do that. But it's possible, and there's certainly people out there that do that. The kicker here was to say, well, if I want to know what this button actually does on my layout, and it's normally not my layout, it's someone else's layout, because I'm just sort of inherited a solution, I can see what that button actually does by actually opening up the script debugger and using it as a detective. So when I click this button with the script debugger open, it instantly, in one click, tells me it runs this script with this parameter. And if I click the Step Into button, then I can read the script and see all of the comments about what parameters are acceptable and read through the script and see what actually that script does. So, and then I can say, stop that script. Okay, I found the information I want. I haven't done anything except open the script debugger and click a button. So rather than having to go into layout mode, double click something, click something, click something, click something to find out what I want, you're using the script debugger as a detective to actually be able to say, right, what do all these buttons do? So you look at something like this and say, all right, there's a button over here that's a envelope here. What does that do? I click that. And in this case, this is a button which is unnamed, which has a single function, and it simply sets a field and I can read that. So, obviously this is a single script step versus a whole script, but this makes it very easy to actually use the debugger, as I say in this article, as a detective tool to be able to very quickly go through a layout and say, what does that do? What does that do? What does that do? Are those two things running the same script? And if not, what happens from there? So that sort of thing can be a very useful sort of technique. Is there anyone else who uses the script debugger like that or in some other innovative sort of way?
Use it all the time.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah. And the data viewer.
And the data viewer, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Interestingly, with one of the persons that I'm mentoring at the moment, they said that possibly the most valuable thing that they've got out of the mentoring is not what I have told them, but what they have seen me doing. All right. And we are on a video call all the time, and we've got their solution that they're developing, and it's right in front. And she says, no, this isn't working at the moment. Why isn't it working? And so I'll open up the script debugger, I'll open up the data viewer, I'll go step through the script a little bit of it, and then have a look at the data viewer. And she says, oh, that's how you work out what's happening at that point in the script. And so it has been incredibly valuable for her to sort of look over my shoulder as an experienced developer and see how I use these tools. She said, I knew that the data viewer existed, but I honestly didn't know how to use it. I didn't know why it was valuable to me. And now I know because I've actually seen you use it 10 times and just hone in on a problem with a script in 2 minutes, and I'd been looking at it for half an hour and couldn't see where it was going wrong. So it's an interesting thing just to be able to watch an experienced developer and go, why did you do that there? Why did you do that? What's that keyboard shortcut? Why do you use that keyboard shortcut all the time rather than going to here? So it's a useful thing to see experienced developers do that. This art of naming things was where I went on about what are valid variable names and also what makes a good variable name. So you start looking at good variable names and testing names. So can you understand its purpose? Is the name specific to what data it holds? Is the naming convention consistent? Can the name be understood by someone reading for the first time? And is it easy to read out loud and understand? All of those things go towards making good variable names. Okay. One of the things I'm looking at in some of the scripting stuff is in writing your scripts and whether or not it's good to remove a script step. So, for example, if we look at a standard sort of process in setting up a loop, we would do a set variable like we could go record count. And that might be the get found count. Okay, and then we might start, for want of a better term, we might start an index, and we start that at 1, and then we hop into our loop, and we do stuff in our loop. So we're doing all the stuff that we do in our loop, and we get to the stage where we need to get out of the loop. So we're not just doing a loop to loop through records here. So we're not doing a get exit after last type of situation. What we're doing is we're going to exit the loop when we've got to the end of our records. So obviously up here there might be a go to first record or something like that. So the question is, the traditional way of doing this is to say, all right, at the end of the loop, we're going to get our index and we're going to increment our index. And then we're going to put an exit loop if statement in here, and we're going to say something like exit loop if the index is greater than the record count. And that works. We've got two steps here, and we can increment our index, and then we can compare it to the record count and see whether we're done yet or we get out of here. Now, the question is, if we don't do it that way, what about if we can do it with one step? And I use this all the time. So I've got this in a text expansion. If we can use a let statement to increment the index and then compare it to the count, so in this case this would be record count, is this better coding than this? And to answer that, we need to sort of go back to our questions about what's good coding. We are effectively writing 2 steps as 1 step here, but the question is it better coding? Question? Yes, no.
Well, let's do a cost benefit of analysis here. What is the cost of having 2 steps versus the cost of having 1 step that's harder to understand?
Yep.
For a newbie. For a newbie. If we're writing for other experienced developers and we know that only experienced developers are ever going to see this, maybe it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But if there's no cost to doing it in a way that a newbie will understand, why not do it that way?
Yeah. So that's what it comes down to with some of these things. You look at it and you say, if I do this and it works with less steps, is that good? Is it better to do it with less steps? I mean, is it more performant to do it with less steps? And the answer normally is no. If you run this script with the 2 steps and run it with the 1 step, you'll find that there's no difference in the number of microseconds the loop takes to run. So that there's not going to be a performance benefit there necessarily. And we've got to look at some of your clever coding, and you've got to look at it and say, have I actually done something good here, or have I actually lost something? I think it's sort of 6 one, half of the dozen the other for this particular example, that honestly, I believe that this exit loop, if let the index be the index plus 1, and then index is greater than the record count, is marginally more difficult to understand than incrementing the index and then exit the loop if. So I think this is sort of a very edge case of, I don't honestly think that this is less difficult to read than these 2 steps, but your mileage may vary.
David? Sorry,
Yeah.
I have a really strong opinion about this. I agree with you. It's cryptic by nature of doing that, and I always defer as one of my bottom lines in any coding is this applicable to collaboration? If I write something that is a little bit cryptic and then I multiply that cryptical coding times thousands of times in my solution, I've now made something that's very difficult to collaborate with. I'd rather have a script that's twice as long, that everything's spelled out, that we know the performance will be virtually identical. But by breaking it out into steps, I also use a single pass looping and things like that, just to get indents so that each section of a loop is much more readable, each section of a script is more readable. There's a lot of little tricks in scripting to make it much more collaborative. And to me, that's a bottom line, because 5 years from now, I might be dead. And what's somebody going to do when they've got to figure out every little line and the cryptical nature of it? So that's my opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's always something that you've got to be thinking about and second guessing what your natural habits with scripting are. And as I said, I mean, you can have an opinion and you can say, this is the way I always exit the loops, and this is why I do it that way. And someone else can come along and say, this is the way I always exit the loops, and this is why I do it that way. You're both right. Both opinions are right. Each person needs to be able to defend that opinion and defend the reason why they do it that way. And in a lot of ways, as I say, I think there's a degree of difference between these 2 things. But your mileage may vary. Someone wrote me an email the other day about one of my posts and said, yeah, I used to do that. And what I discovered was that what they did, for example, was this. Let's say we're going to go back to this, and let's comment those. So what the argument was that he said that I used to actually increment, or I actually used to set the index to 1 to start with, and then do what you've been doing. But then I discovered that you can actually do this and this, and it still works. I'll just see whether it, without your step here, and it still works. Because obviously if an index is not instantiated, if the index didn't actually exist before this loop, then the index is effectively 0 here and therefore is not even, and this will actually continue. And then you increment it the first time that goes to 1 and you do whatever you need to do. This is not exactly the example that he had. But my argument in the end was, yes, that works, but no, it's not very good code. Anyone like to chip in on why it's not very good code? Tony?
Thank you. I'll chime in and say that I wonder what Monkey Bread would have to say about the use of a variable prior to its declaration. You might get red text.
Yeah.
I want to, while I got the mic, I just want to add one other thing, that I am in the camp, thematically what you showed just a moment ago, I'm in the camp of declaring a variable prior to taking action on it. And it comes up in, if you're going to pass a JSON object to another script, I would rather set a variable like JSON, might be a good name for it, prior to putting it in a script that's going to jump somewhere else. Same thing with like build an Apple script and then run, set Apple script to complicated code, perform. So long story short, declaring things before using them that's the camp that I'm in. I like the topic, by the way.
Absolutely. The thing that the problem that I've got with this and the particular example that turned out is that you end up reading the code, and because you're actually using this variable before it gets formally incremented, you sort of read this code in order and you say, where did that come from?
Exactly.
And what would the value of it be? And you go, oh, that's right. It hasn't actually been used before in this script, therefore it's empty, therefore it works. But you've just wasted a number of brain cycles trying to work out where the hell a particular variable came from. And it's a big problem that I've seen with a number of scripts that I've inherited, where people have used these sort of various techniques to instantiate variables before they actually exist, or to use the variables before they actually exist, because they argue that, well, when I use it, it actually becomes into its existence. So it's an interesting sort of idea.
If you start getting more involved with while function, you have to define all those variables up front or they're not useful. So since I'm moving away from a tail or regular recursive custom functions, I'm using while custom functions, you're declaring the variables up front. So that's good patterning in your head for scripting, because it's a very similar process. The other point I would add, that again about collaboration, whatever you do, do it consistent across all your systems with everybody on the team. Because if you do it one way and I do it another, we're going to be wasting time and getting frustrated.
Exactly. And that's what it came down to with some of this stuff with the mentoring is and even with having subcontractors on board, is that I realized that over the years I've developed a massive number of habits and protocols and things, and I've never written them all down. I just do things the way that I do it. That just comes out of my head. That's the way I do things. So, but when you bring someone into your organization and say, we want you to do some scripting for us, and these are the rules, it's a lot like talking to AI and saying, I would like you to write a script for me, but I don't want you ever to allow user abort off at the start of every script or set error capture on. And these are all the rules that you need to work by. Stephen.
Yes, I would just add in here that when you were asking about the one-step or two-step solution for for exiting the loop, I would favor the one step, but I would make it a two-step entry. And the first step would be a comment to explain the next step. The last job I worked in IT, I was hired in because I had decades of FileMaker experience, and the guy whose solution needed work didn't. But I had to write it so he could understand it. And I got in the habit of taking as many shortcuts as I could and explaining every single step in a comment. And it didn't take me longer, and it helped me think through things. And when he opened up the scripts, he could understand them for the first time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what it comes down to have readable, self-documenting code that is still performant. And that's what we strive for. John?
Yeah, Eric had put something in the comment or in the chat about having the exit loop at the beginning and combining that with the edge case detective discussion earlier. I've found if I have that exit loop at the beginning, I can avoid having to check for the edge case of, do I have at least one record to loop through? So I just want to throw that out there for discussion.
Yeah, it's something that I'm getting to in one of the emails at the moment. It's something that AI started calling a double-gated loop, where you look at this and you look at a process where you've done some kind of perform find and you found some records, and then you want to go through those sort of things, and you say, right, well, I'm gonna go to record first. And this is a question as well, when I perform a find, do I go to the first record before I step into my loop? I'll come back to that in a sec. So you look at this and say, right, actually it should, no. I'll build this from scratch. So you perform a find, you found a set of records, you go to the first record, you set an index, possibly. Let's just hop into the loop. Whoops. And in this loop, we're going to do something to the records, and then we're going to exit loop if, and we're going to do our standard sort of exit loop thing, whether you do it in one step or two. And the question is here whether you should actually put the exit loop at the start or the end. In this case, if you do it this way, obviously it's going to increment the index, and therefore what you're going to need to do over here is actually start the index at 0, which again leads to less readable code, because you're looking at this and going, why are you starting an index at 0? Is this some sort of JSON processing or something? And it's no, because I immediately increment it. The solution here looked at being able to do your normal exit loop, but also put an exit loop in here and say, if the get found count equals 0, then just jump straight out. So what they called that was sort of a double-gated loop, where you say that at the start of the loop, you've got some sort of immediate eject button to say, don't bother going on here. And then at the end of the loop, you've got your normal sort of eject button to say that if you've finished processing all the records, then get out at this stage. So I've sort of been looking at that. It'll come up in one of the script logic emails in a few days.
David, is this different? Is this different than the idea that you would just, run a calculation before you begin the loop? I mean, in years ago, obviously, we all got hit by like, oh, dang, I got to crash FileMaker, right? But just simply testing for the condition to make sure it's a condition that warrants a loop. Is this different?
It is different. So yes, you can do something like this. If we just ignore that for the moment, you can do something like this and wrap the whole loop inside an if statement and say,
Can't quite see.
if the get found count is greater than 0, so we look at this and say if the get found count is greater than 0, then do the loop, otherwise don't do anything. But the thing is that it ends up creating less readable code because you're indenting the loop, and the loop may be a very complicated thing that's actually happening. So the preference for me is to say don't bother wrapping it in that. Just test whether you should be here or not right from the start, and then keep going with it if you're okay.
But then in terms of performance, then is that an extra step that needs to get evaluated every time through the loop? And shouldn't that be done somewhere else to try to make it more performant?
That's a good point.
Again, you can look at that and say that you could test the performance on that particular step and say, well, it might not need to be. It's not a major performance hit to the loop as a whole. And I would go that way rather than the if, wrapping the loop inside an if.
Agreed. I used to do the if, and then when I realized, I can do it inside, if I structure the loop right, and when it's time to exit, if I check for the exit at the beginning, structure things right, then I only have to put the exit once, and yet it'll handle that edge case, and maybe it should never happen, but what if it does? And then I won't be working on the found set of 1,000,000 records instead of the 70 that I thought I was going to find, but nothing matched the find request.
Exactly.
And so I really appreciate the challenging the assumptions and coming up with 3 different ways to do it. So yes, I have my opinions too, but I really appreciate the discussion.
Yep. Darren.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add would say if you're calling the function multiple times, declare it in a variable early on in the script. So then it is not being called interactively. Like if you're working with the same found count, just as an example, if you're saying this is a one script, one purpose, I need to do the found count, but I'm going to reference it multiple times, then declare it once, set it in a variable, and then reference it multiple times, because then you are talking about the difference of performance. And the opposite on that is that, you're going to declare it up front, but if you're going to do a new search, you then need to redefine what that value should be. And there's a lot of talk about what is performant and what's not. And the example I give is if you want to get a date as a number, that's apparently more performant than the date itself, but it's not human readable.
Yeah.
So if someone has to read the code and have a data viewer open and copy and paste or keep track of what things are in their head, then the ability to read the code is not as performant. And we're talking milliseconds when it comes to the difference between a number and a date. So the amount of time it's going to take someone to read that code, because you write once, it executes multiple times, but how often are you going to have to troubleshoot it?
Yeah, exactly.
And one of those points is if you're not declaring a variable at the start of the script, you have to run the script to test it. And you may not have the opportunity to do that in a live environment or production environment. So then if you declare all your variables up front, and as a developer, you come and step through it with the debugger, and you can see that variable data hitting that script is not correct, you don't have to run it. So again, it's the context of the troubleshooting of the script that you need to include in whether or not something's performant or not.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I mean, there are obviously a number of people out there who are very big on FileMaker performance and improving FileMaker performance, and they do all these sort of tests on, a number is more performant than the date and blah blah blah. You look at the reality of some of this stuff, and as you say, it's milliseconds, if not microseconds, difference in these sort of things. And then they go, well, but if you were running a loop that was looping through a million records, you go, yeah, okay. If I never do that, so let's just ignore that. So it's one of those things that goes round and round. You go, it would be more performant if you did this, but as with the last conversation, there's always this question of, but if I'm sacrificing readability and troubleshooting ability for performance, then I've just wasted a whole bunch of time. So it's a question of whether you're going to lose the time now or lose the time later. And it was at the end of one of the emails that I wrote that that good scripting actually saves you time now. Sorry, saves you time later. Bad scripting saves you time now. So where do you want to save that time?
Maybe we need to come up with a fancy term like performant, but instead of performant referring to the computer that's doing it, we need it for the developer. So some word that means it's performant for the developers that look at it now and in the future.
Yep, absolutely. So it's I don't know how we're going with time, but I can use another 4 hours if you want.
Let's do it. Let's break the record.
Break the record. Here was an interesting sort of discussion and sort of build here, and I'd be interested in people's sort of outcomes at the end of this. The problem with scripting and the problem with auditing this sort of stuff is where you look at a script, and it might be a script in your system that you've written 3 years ago, and these scripts sort of get written and then used and then not used, and it's a question when you come back to the system of whether these scripts are actually being used or not. And in my case, a lot of this comes up where I inherit someone else's system and there are 100 scripts in there or 1,000 scripts in there, and you go, do any of these actually even get used? And some of those scripts are called Robert's Special Report or something like that, or even Untitled 347. So it's a question of whether a script actually gets used. And unfortunately, there is nothing native within FileMaker that allows us to tell whether scripts are actually being used. Someone did suggest in an email that you could have a look at the server logs, but unless they're very easily accessible and reportable, I suppose what you could do is you could take server logs and you could push them through AI and ask them questions about how many times has this script been used in the last 6 months. But I think the end point of it is that you can script a solution to work out whether this script is actually being used. And the end point of it was something like this, where we have a script where we are basically collecting a whole bunch of data. And in this case, there's certainly more data that you could collect depending on what you wanted to report on. So we're collecting the parameter, and we're unloading that parameter in this usage. So we are unloading the name of the script that was running when we logged this, the parameter that was used to actually run that script, and the layout that you happen to be on at the time. And then you're going off to the script log and you're writing all of this stuff out and recording, obviously, all of those things. You're also recording who actually ran the script, and recording both the account name, which is obviously the most useful, but the username just in case, the file that they were running, the host that the file was on, and the application version that they were running. And you end up with a simple situation where you can log the script usage, and you can do it in one step or two. I'll try and find one. So this is where you're actually logging it in 2 steps, where you're saying, all right, collect all the script data to start with. So this is all the stuff that I can't collect once I leave the script. So I need to know what the script was, what parameter drove it, and what layout it was actually driven from. And then we push that into the script usage and get all of that other stuff out. And what we end up with is a script log where we've got all this information about when the script actually ran, what the file was, what the layout was. Collecting the file name is more in the name of being able to do this from a number of different files. Obviously, if you run it from this particular file, the file name is always going to be the same. What layout you were running it from, I found this incredibly useful for troubleshooting. When someone comes back and says, this script doesn't work, I'll go, hang on, where do you actually run it from? And they go, I ran it from the database. So it's useful to actually know where it was actually run from, what the script was, what the parameter was that drove that script, who actually ran it, and what client they were actually using at the time. So all of this becomes really useful information. And then, of course, what you then want to do is to process all of that data. The problem with that is that this will actually accurately log every time every script that you asked to be logged has been used. What it doesn't do is it doesn't record what hasn't been logged. And that's actually the most important part about logging script usage, is not necessarily what was used, but more to the point, what wasn't used. So what we then do is we run a report to say, all right, get me all of the script names that exist at the moment and tell me which one of those scripts has not been run within the last 6 months or whatever. So in the email side of things, I didn't actually get up to that, but auditing the script usage is the important thing. You can actually, obviously, you can report on what's actually there in the script, but the most important thing in it is, in actual fact, comes down to what's not there. So you're going to use functions like this design function, where we can actually get a list of all the scripts that actually exist, and then we can actually use that in some kind of virtual list capability to be able to go through and work out what's actually been used and what hasn't been used. So what we aim for in this is 3 things. Minimal performance impact, which I think this script does. Low developer friction, though it's quite easy to actually copy and paste those 2 script steps at the start of any script and get it logged. And then universal application, it will work everywhere in terms of, it doesn't matter whether someone was using WebDirect or running the script through a perform script on server or running it in a FileMaker client, it will still log everything. So what I didn't get to with that was actually doing the actual process. And there are obviously other things out there that actually do this as well. Question is, what do you do? Do you actually log scripts usage, or do you have some method of doing that and some method of reporting on that?
I very frequently do something that's very similar to what you do, but it's a little bit more. I have a custom function called _log, which accepts one parameter, just a text string. It takes that text string, it builds a JSON object with all sorts of environmental information in it, and then that text string as one particular key, data. And then what I'll have is a script which runs on the server. So I'll do a script called log. There's a custom function called _log. So I'll say perform script log, and the parameter is log with some local information for just that call, whatever I'm doing, could be anything. So all the environmental information always gets logged as the script parameter, plus whatever custom message I want to put in at that point. And then it runs that on the server. What happens in the server script is it just goes to a table called log. It creates a new record and it farms all that information into fields on the server, not even locally. And then I just put I sprinkle that. I'll put every single branch in the script. I will put a call to that. And it's always the same thing. Perform script log with the parameter _log and whatever little bit of information. This is step 1. This is step 2. This is step 3, and this variable is this. And then you get not just a script, a log of what ran, but you can actually watch the progression. You can watch how things branch between various clauses in your script.
Yeah. I don't know whether anyone has produced third-party sort of tools that do that sort of stuff. I don't know if there's one out there, but obviously you can roll your own all the time. But it's I think it's an interesting thing.
I think Hansa has quite a few things that you can do to add. You still have to modify your script to do this, but you can measure and find detail.
Yeah,
exactly. Maybe that's a feature request for Claris to do this sort of stuff for us.
The only thing I would add is if you're going to do it locally and not run it in a server script, open a new window to do it in so that you're not disturbing your found set or accidentally running script triggers when you come back to the layout that you're on from the log layout.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at this, this particular, and I was going to get to this in the email at some stage, but this particular one will actually just freeze the window and go to that script log and do what it needs to do and then come back. But obviously the better way to do this, and this is another sort of a whole other email. This is why I'm never going to run out of stuff to talk about in script logic. Because then you look at this and you go, well, what's the bad thing about that? What would you do with that? And spawning a new window is the ideal sort of situation to be able to say, do a new window, do whatever you need to do in it, then close the window. User never sees it. It's fine, and it doesn't interrupt your found set. So it's a good adjunct to that. And I think I've got this one sitting there just as the fodder for a new email to say what's wrong with this script or how could this script be better. Tony.
David, another topic I like a lot. Hey, just for fun and kind of in line with what when you were torturing Google Gemini earlier today, I just innocently asked Grok to tell me all about the get call stack function. And it's apparently they think it exists. I wish it did. I like what you're doing. In an excess of paranoia, I've been known to use the custom functions to get the script ID and the layout ID because sometimes I change them or other people change them. So in the long term, but there's good stuff.
Absolutely, there's definitely some other stuff, and I mean, once you've got this script logging, the script usage logging going, then you can go to the ultimate degree in terms of what you want to collect along the way and what you want to analyze it. But it's one of those things where you get into the rabbit hole of saying, well, I'm going to collect all of this stuff, and then you never use it. So, it's always one of those things that there needs to be some purpose to this stuff, that if you collect all of this stuff just in case, and even never delete the records. I was looking at a database, again, that I didn't write, that was actually logging things like Michael just said, where it actually logs, they're sprinkled through all of the scripts, and these scripts run like there's a couple of scripts that run every 5 minutes on the server, and there are a number of these script logging things logged in what he called a dump log. And I went and had a look at that table at some stage, and it had records dating back to like 2021, and there are like 1 million records in there. And I'm going, all right, at some stage, we need to actually dump the dump log because no one's ever going to go back and have a look at what happened in that script in 2023. So it's something that you need to think about in terms of how much you're going to collect. And I mean, that's what happened when people said, we need FileMaker or Claris to produce an audit log so that I can actually automatically turn the audit log on and know who changed everything in every single record of every single table and every single field. And you go, do you know how much data you're about to generate? And they go, it can't be that much. And you go, no, you're going to generate gigabytes of data. And you're actually not even going to look at it. You don't realize that you're not going to look at it. But yeah. So in the name of logging stuff, it also brings up the whole idea of measuring performance and being able to say, all right, well, can you measure the performance? Because I wrote an article about, the typical sort of situation where users come back to you and they say, that report's really slow now. And you go, oh, really? How slow is it? And they go, a lot slower than it was before. You go, oh, how fast was it before? Really fast. And you go, and now it's really slow. And you go, so how much slower is it? No, show me. And they show you, and it takes about 5 seconds to run. And they go, it used to just go like that before. And so it's a question of, putting some metrics around this stuff and being able to say, well, now it runs in 4.2 seconds, and last week it used to run in 1.3 seconds. What's the difference? So there are techniques, obviously, that you can use to measure how fast a script actually takes to run, or how long it takes to run. But one of the things that we need to also be able to do is we need to be able to record that. So we need to be able to log all of this stuff as well. So another one of the logs that we can build into our system is a log of speed of execution of these scripts, so that when someone comes along and says that the monthly report takes a long time to run and it's really slow these days, you can go back like a year ago and say, no, it used to take 3.2 seconds to run. It now takes 3.5 seconds to run. There's not a problem there. So this is where we start looking at things like this standard sort of process here, where we get the current time and we get the current time at the end and we subtract one from the other. And so we see how long that little process in the middle actually took to run. But the kicker here is that not only do we get the time that it took to run, but we actually log that in some sort of dump log, so that we can actually say, right, it actually took from here to here, it actually took this long to run. The problem with that is that a script will exit a lot of different places, or may exit a lot of different places. So sometimes it will be really quick because it found no records and therefore didn't do anything. Sometimes it will be really slow because it found 1 million records and it took a long time to do that sort of thing. So there are complexities in there as to where you actually insert these steps into scripts and where you actually log the time and that things are actually taking. But I think it's something that's really worthwhile investigating as to whether we can come up with some sort of scripted process to actually record the time that all of these processes take and log all of that stuff, and then turn it around so that we can report on that stuff. And ultimately, as a developer, what you're trying to do, or what you will be trying to do, is get ahead of the user so you actually know which processes are actually slowing down over time and which processes are not, so that you can get ahead of the user and actually fix those problems before they come to you and say everything's slow. Does anyone currently do logging of performance of scripts?
I'm going to be very careful here because this is my first time here, and I don't want to break a rule.
No.
So if I'm breaking a rule, tell me.
We'll kick you
We
out.
developed something called FM Server Pulse. FM Server, PULSE.com. And it does everything you're talking about. So
To record every performance of every script.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't. I've got some early people helping me with it right now. A certain Canadian company is testing it on their servers, and I'll give a free license to anybody who wants to look at it for me. But I don't want to break a rule here, so tell me when to shut up.
I actually encourage people to feel free to spam the chat as much as you want, and let us know about these things.
Okay. Well, I hate spam, and I
but
respect
it's in the
you
chat.
all.
It's cool.
Well, I've been doing this. My first client was in 1989, so I'm relating to a lot of you folks, and I've been doing this all my life. And but I've never gotten to meet all the cool people who are in the community because I was just having kids and stuff like that. So
it's pretty habitual for people like in the background. Sometimes the speaker will be talking and we'll be throwing side conversations in there related to the topic that the speaker's speaking about. And if you put links like that in there, I'm sure they'll be welcome.
Okay, well, I appreciate that very much. I consider my invitation here by John to be something that I really care about. So thank you again, John.
I think one of the most valuable things about these sort of discussions is those things that come out that someone says, "Oh, there's a tool for that." You go, "I didn't even know. That tool's been around for 3 years and you've been using it forever and you never told me." I think we all need to know that there are tools out there that do different things, and whether you subscribe to those tools or not is up to you. I mean, there are you look at things like agentic development in FileMaker at the moment, and I think Darren blogged about it the other day. I think there are about 5 or 6 in development at the moment before Claris come up with whatever they're going to come up with. 5 or 6 of them in development at the moment, and I don't think anyone's got enough time to actually get into every one of those. I mean, everyone's going to have to make a decision at some stage and say, "That's the one I'm going to hang my hat on." But the fact that there are so many of those tools out there, I mean, even you go back to DDR analysis, there've been base elements and Inspector Pro and stuff forever, and then other ones have come along in the interim, and everyone's got their favorites as to which one they use and why they use it, and there's sort of at the end of the day you sort of hang your hat on one of those things. But it's important to know that there are other tools out there that do other things, and that's why it's you certainly don't want to spam people with the marketing of saying, you should buy this, you should buy this, you should buy this. But if people don't know you're out there, then these are the sort of forums for it to get known, and then people start using it and other people come along. Yeah. As one of the most important things I learned from Apple when I was when I worked for Apple was in their marketing, and it was something that was sort of said to me at one stage. It was in one of Apple's marketing presentations, and they said, "Do you know what we do in marketing? Do you notice, or you should notice from now on, we never say that our products are the best products in the world. The only people that say that Apple's products are the best products of the world are people who use those products." And, that's a really important marketing thing. You've got to get other people to sell your products on the basis of what they've done, how they've saved time with them or saved their life with them or whatever, rather than them actually coming out and saying it.
You know, that's such an interesting thing you just said, because I remember hearing from a speech that I think Steve Jobs gave years ago, and he said, we build things because we base it on how do we want people to feel. How do we want people to feel when they use it? And that's a very kind of interesting look at it. Like, you know, when you develop a UI for somebody, how do they feel using it? Does it feel good? Do they move around? Everything is kind of nice and fluid. And I like that feeling, because it's not just does it technically work, but does it give people a feeling that they're glad to be in it?
Yeah, exactly. It's an important thing from the point of view of selling stuff is getting other people to sell it for you, I think. Okay. I really think that I should stop there. If you are not already a subscriber to ScriptLogic, I encourage you to head on over to scriptlogic.kit.com and sign up and see what's going on. And also, if you don't want to sign up, you can just go straight to this ScriptLogic posts page, and you can have a look at all of the posts that have been pushed out over the last 6 weeks or so. And this will just keep going every day. So no, I encourage you to have a look at that. In the early days of ScriptLogic, I pushed out an email to all the subscribers and said, is anyone there? I'm not hearing from anyone. Am I talking to myself? And a lot of very kind people wrote back and said, no, this is fantastic. I'm really happy to read what you're writing, and I'm learning a few things along the way as well. So that really makes me happy that happens along the way. Someone did suggest in the early days that, is there somewhere we can go to discuss these things that you're writing about? And that's in the works at the moment. I'm sort of working out what the best way to do that would be, but that would get some sort of live interaction on some of these things. But for the moment, I'm just sort of pushing all these things out. I'm interested in people can email me at any time and say what they think about it, and whether I'm having myself on that this is the right way to do things or this is a good idea.
David, are you saying that not everybody signed up for it already during this meeting? I know I did.
Apparently not.
Oh, I will. You told us not to right away.
No, don't sign up. Don't sign up for this ScriptLogic. In here, ScriptLogic itself is this sort of subscription plan.
Yeah, I bought the Curious free one already just to feel it.
Yeah, you can certainly sign up for the Curious level, which is free, and that gets you the introduction to scripting, and it also gets you a whole bunch of sample lessons there just to see what it's going to be like. But just don't sign up for these paid ones at the moment. But you can go to scriptlogic.kit.com, and you can sign up for the email. When I asked for feedback on it, someone actually wrote to me and said, I really like these. Are you telling me that these are not going to be free sometime in the future? Because if that's the case, unfortunately, I can't afford to pay for them. And I sent back an email saying, these will be, and it says here somewhere, I think, these will be free forever. Yeah. How much does this cost? This particular email list is nothing, nada, free forever. Enjoy. So I encourage everyone to sign up at least to the email list, and when the other stuff, if you're on the email list, when the other stuff is ready to go, if you want to sign up for that, then you can as well. But that's more in-depth sort of training. So
David,
I
this is
suppose,
great.
sorry,
I said,
just
David,
to-
this is great.
Great, excellent. To wrap this stuff up, I will go back to my goals of good scripting, and they are to create readable code, to create, if possible, self-documenting code, to create performant code, to create bulletproof code, and also to create code that you can justify to another developer in that was the way you did it, and this is why, and it works. So if you can achieve all of those things when you write scripts, then I think that's great. I think that you should apply the principle each time you write a script, if you've got time, to try and write it in a couple of different ways, 2 or 3 different ways. And if you can do that, then you've got in front of you a decision to make as to which one of those is the best way to do it for that particular circumstance. And I think as an exercise, that is a great thing to be able to do. It really makes you think. So, and I think that's what we all should be doing more of, is thinking. So with that, I'll hand over to general discussion, but thank you very much for your attention and contribution.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Good as
thanks,
always.
David. Are you going to put together a markdown file with all the knowledge?
Yeah, someone said, so are you writing a book? And I said, oh, God,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I try to have a bit of fun with the AI side of things. So
Yep.
and if I'm not sharing it, but I do have a markdown file called not David head, and it automatically puts allow user abort, error capture on, and then finishes the script with a exit script step that's blank. So that markdown file is called not David head.
David head, yeah.
Now we need to know what AI can and can't do. You know, and we need to push the boundaries and go, well, yeah, let's try this. Let's see what happens. So
If
this
you
is
how would you write this script?
this is the circular recursive thought process. Okay, David's taught me to try something different, so I'm going to build a markdown file that Dave would tell me not to do. So that's the exit clause of the recursion.
What's the worst script that you can write that would make David Ed pull all his hair that's left out?
Sounds like the old book that Leonard Nimoy wrote called "I Am Not Spock."
Yeah, yeah.
Use the whole alphabet, AA, plus, all the variable names.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so yeah, the variable $K. I didn't even get to not using global variables in your life. I've got a whole
I guess you don't like regular expressions then, huh?
Probably not. No.
You ever seen that? You ever seen that code?
I like regular expressions for their conciseness and just amazing ability to do amazing things in 5 letters, but I hate them for everything else.
Yeah, I agree.
For 4 years during COVID, I worked for a medical company that would not allow you to write any unstored calculations. Neither would they let you use any global variables. I would love to put that before you.
Yeah. I would agree with the global variables. I haven't found a good reason to use the global variable yet. But that's another case.
Would you use a custom function to declare a global variable?
How about you use a custom function to unload JSON into the global variables?
There you go.
I saw
it's horrible.
I saw
Horrible.
something today. I don't think I'm actually slagging off a fellow developer because I don't know who in the very long history of this particular file actually wrote this, but I saw something today. So there's in the table, there's a global that contains the ID of the current logged in user, and we need to send an email with that person's name. It says this is from such and such a person. And the way whoever wrote this script did it was, instead of having a relationship from, say, the user ID to the employees table and grabbing the name, the script took the field with the ID, stuck it in a JSON structure, passed that as the script parameter to a script in the personnel file, which then did a find for the record, grabbed the name, stuck that in a JSON structure, and returned it as a script result. They stuck the script result into a variable and then used JSON get element on the variable. And I was like, there's code golf where you're trying to get as little code as possible. This is like, I don't know what the opposite of that is. It's like code basketball. Yeah.
That's like some kind of weird indirection, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's like the Mariah Carey. The Mariah Carey scripting, trying to hit every single note while you're trying to get on the voice.
That's exactly right. Well,
it's one of those things where someone says, last weekend I discovered JSON and I just wrote this script because of it.
Well, I think a lot of people are inordinately, JSON certainly has its uses, and coming from doing a lot of JavaScript programming, I absolutely see the value of passing parameters as JSON objects, but I think a lot of people don't quite get it, and they just love it for being JSON, and they feel creative or smart or something using it. I don't know. There's certainly a lot of it there in places where it doesn't quite need to be.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Actually, if you go to went to Full Access last year, you got a chance to hear Clay Makel say, "I hate JSON."
That's a reality check, huh?
The guy who made it work.
I don't think that global variables are actually evil, as repeating fields are. I think the more the case is that you can set a global variable, but a lot of people don't clear it out when they've finished using it. So pop an exit script into your script that just clears out all the global variables at the end of your script.
And that's what I thought the garbage collection script step was for on the server.
Yeah. Just clear them out. Once inside that script, don't pass the variable across to another subscript. Just clear it out.
It's a very small globe.
I want to, may I share my screen for just a second? I only because I'm friends with a guy who is a fairly prominent computer scientist in certain circles, and I've got him on my quotes page right here. Already, I preserve this on my website's quote page because I like it that much. Just thought that was funny.
That's right. XML.
Very good.
Well, where's Bev? Hey, Vince, you're muted.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say where's Bev? Yeah. David, this is great. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
If you ever run out of stuff to talk about scripts, there's all relationships and table occurrences and
exactly. I sort of considered that when I was setting this up, and someone else said exactly the same thing. They said, "Oh, so you're going to do one of these for calculations? Are you going to do one of these for layout design?" I go, no, I've got enough to talk about in scripting.
No, I think even within scripts, the minutia is fractal. The more you look at it, the more of it there is.
Well, there's
It's amazing.
there's some overlap because there's several things I used to use scripts for that I can use a while loop with.
Right. That's a whole discussion about the value of scripting and how you would use some of the value, how do I say this? Test it out in the data viewer before actually writing a script, and the while function comes in very helpful there, or writing while function. And that's a whole conversation. I heard you make a comment earlier, David, that apparently you have a strong opinion about anchor buoy.
Yes.
Oh, it's time for me to
Is it going to make it on the
No, really. I have to go, but thank you so much, everyone.
See you soon, Vince.
Thanks, Vince.
That's how we get Vince to leave when we start talking about Anchor Buoy again.
In short, I actually used to teach it. I used to teach it, and I saw a lot of pennies drop when people suddenly understood what relationships were all about, and it was great. But I have gone past that now, and I should write about it somewhere, but I subscribe to what I call functional groups now. So I have an anchor in a functional group, but I don't have a functional group for every table occurrence like Anchor Buoy has. So
it's selective, really. It's selective application, right?
It's selective, and it means that one of the things that came out when the Anchor Buoy thing came out was that the Claris, or at the time the FileMaker engineers, just said, "What the hell?" So we spent all this time making bi-directional relationships, and these Anchor Buoy people came along and said, "No, only go left to right." And you're going, all right, so you can't use, even though you've got a relationship there that could easily be used to go from right to left, you're not going to use it because you're doing Anchor Buoy. So that's where I sort of diverged from Anchor Buoy and said, no, I have the relationship already. I can use it. It's just sitting there, right there in my graph. And I find that my graphs are a lot smaller than the Anchor Buoy solutions that I inherit. Right.
But if you do it in Hebrew, you can do it right to left.
Yes.
I think you're in good company with what Keith. I don't know if you know Keith Proctor, but he would warn us against Anchor Buoy as well. He said, you if you can keep that table graph smaller, you're better off.
I happen to be a pretty big fan of Anchor Buoy, but I use what I like it like 95%. I use what I call just a modified Anchor Buoy, which is that it's Anchor Buoy, but if you have a table that's invoice line items, semantically, anywhere in the system where invoice line items make semantic sense, you should be able to say invoice line items and have it refer to that table. So I don't believe in the absolute strict, in the incredibly strict, everything goes right to left. Everything is separated by functional groups like that. There should be canonical tables where the semantic meanings actually make sense and can refer to each other. And then you drop, for more specialized uses, you drop Anchor Buoy off of those.
I don't think that's an argument that's ever going to get settled in the community. We all have a little bit of nuances about our scheme relational graph methodology.
I have a nuance. I tried it a different way recently, and I did it with 0 relationships and 100% the MBS SQL functions.
Yeah.
So the scripts don't care where they run because context doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I can rejigger basically the entire relationship graph in code instead of having to do it actually on the graph.
I have
no performance issues with that?
Oh, it's blindingly faster.
Yeah.
Faster?
Yeah.
Wow.
I have a whole series of custom functions that do something similar, which I'm hoping, after literally 20 years of working on this, to perhaps have polished off in time to show somebody in August. But yeah, exactly. Doing things with recursion and with other kinds of lookups rather than relying on the relationship graph.
It's really kind of freed me in a sense of just saying, okay, I've got my entire database system here. Now I can just rejigger it and reformulate it in the JavaScript that runs in a web viewer. And I just developed, a bunch of scripts that create all the JSON objects. And one of the things I found, it's fast. And I started on it because I was working on a job that, they were dealing with millions of records, and they thought we're never going to be able to do a standard list view, so they wanted to do it in JavaScript, and there were a lot of performance benefit to that. But then it sort of I just went for it, And it's a pretty cool way to develop where, it's the schema is kind of, it's all in memory now,
Well, wouldn't you rather do this?
Matthew's going to show that to me real soon, right, Matthew? We're going to have a meeting.
We are, sir, anytime you want it.
Yeah. David is showing my first FileMaker 7 relational graph right here.
7.
This is one of my
yes.
Angry fruit salad on steroids.
This is one of
if
my
I never see one of those again, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Go on, David.
He has decided to get me to rebuild his database.
Ugh. Yeah, it's called Build It from Scratch. Oh my God.
Absolutely. And we've sort of broken down this into the underlying entity relationship diagram, and we're rebuilding from scratch.
Nothing less than $100,000 on that baby.
Is everybody dumping their DDRs like into AI and stuff? Is that a pretty common thing now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's becoming more common.
Yeah.
Not me.
Not
I
yet.
think
Some
that's
people.
sort of a little bit of a proprietary information that I would not want to send to the.
Well, you don't send it; you run it off your own computer. So if you run it, all your own files on your own drive, you're not actually sending anything.
Yeah.
So how do you? Are you talking about AI that's local onto your computer?
No, there's no local model available right now that's as good as Opus 4.7 in max mode with 1 million tokens. Nothing else you can buy. And so you can set up where all your files are on your own local disk, but all of the AI functions are still coming from the best model in the industry right now. It was the only way we were able to actually break through. I said earlier, it's like when we were doing Sonnet, 4.5, 4.6, it would just constantly forget its way. But I can now spit out 50 scripts in a row, each have hundreds of lines, and all of them perfect.
So how do you send a DDR to AI? AI is software. I mean, its marketing term is AI. But how do I send something to AI if AI is running in the cloud?
Well, there's first of all, I only really know, I jettisoned all of the other LLMs early, and I only use Anthropics. And Opus 4.7 now out is basically set up so that, again, all of the files, my hundreds of XML files, hundreds, dozens at least of MD files, and all kinds of databases and stuff like that, all sit on my local drive. But using the Claude extension in VS Code, I can act on all those files. So it doesn't actually send what happens back up to Anthropic.
So if you unplugged your computer from the internet, would it work?
I never do that. I wouldn't even think about doing that.
I mean, it seems to me that you're sending data to the cloud. Otherwise, where's the logic coming from?
Well, I know it works. And as far as sending to the cloud, I think, at this point in my life, my whole life is in the cloud, right? As soon as I got an Apple subscription. But, I don't have that. I know I've talked to Bruno about this a couple of times, and he's very big on like running local models. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. But the local models can't typically do what the very latest and greatest does. And so if you really are, you don't want anything in the cloud, then I can't guarantee you that. I'm here for that. But I will tell you that when it would always break is that when the systems where I would upload files, now all of my files are on my local disk. So I'd be happy to talk to anybody about this. I love it. So
here's some controversial thoughts, or here's actually a question for anyone with this AI, which is all the rage, all the latest thing. Do you think most developers, when they're building scripts, build scripts in their entirety, or they build them in pieces? I'll go first. I think most of the scripting that I do is piece by piece or block by block. I almost never build a script in its entirety. It's more piece by piece by piece.
It's a trap. I will answer that. I don't, I think when I was, writing scripts myself, it's always a part of it at a time. But I've developed a different mindset now with AI because I'm strictly outcome based, and I stay outcome based until I feel like it's done and it's ready and every one of my questions can be answered. So, when I build it like that, I'm not really doing any coding at all until I've absolutely certified in my own mind that the AI model understands the logic that I'm putting out and what outcome I want to see. And then I developed a thing where I use the data viewer and the MBS plugin, and I, at the end of every one of my scripts in process, I have it spit out a big JSON object for what the result was, and then I feed that back to AI. So it's complex, but it really works. Anyway, that's me. I don't think AI is everything. I don't think it can be everything. And I'm glad that people like Bruno's and some others, I think FileMaker, Clara should probably do it too, where it'd be kind of like, there'll be tools built in. But I took a shot at seeing if I could absolutely fully develop FileMaker solutions, and I had a reason to do it outside of FileMaker and bring them in, and it does work.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, John, you want to tell me to shut up yet?
Nobody does that.
Not me. No, I just got another person signing up to full access just now.
Good for you.
Are they on the? Is it Jessica?
No, he's coming from Tokyo.
Oh, awesome.
Whoa. Who is it?
It's the guy who was here last year. What?
Should we stop the recording?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's up to you guys.
I think we should. Let's stop it. It's good to have a mix of recorded and not recorded.
Yeah, just like people.
Well, let me just say, I always say at this point, I always say FileMaker is the greatest platform ever. Okay, now you can stop the recording.
Yeah, right. And so is Tony White.
Okay, no, anyone else? Yeah, just kidding.
I love FileMaker.
Yeah, so I would live
let's
for
see.
it.
So I'm an AI skeptic.
He hasn't turned it off yet.
Well, that's okay. That's public. I'll say it.
Well, let me hear your skepticism.
So first off, AI to me is a marketing term. I've already made the joke that, I'm going to rename. I'm Anthony Stewart White, but I'm going to, henceforth, I shall be referred to as Anthony the Intelligent White. It's ridiculous. Just because some corporations decide to declare that something is intelligent doesn't mean that it is. David Head demonstrated. He asked Google. He gave Google Gemini 5 chances to not be stupid, and it insisted. I did it with Grok, which, by the way, is a useful tool, but it's dumb. It's not intelligent. It's dumb. So it should be instead of artificial. Well, anyway. Okay. So it's not intelligent. So what is it? It
aggregated information given out in a report format.
Yeah, it digests a lot of data and then it basically pukes it out. By the way, I am choosing the word puke on purpose. That's what it does. And I think that actually David's approach, where he's examining script steps and patterns, is actually true intelligence as opposed to a marketing term.
Right.
Because you're thinking about the product based on knowledge of the product as it exists, as opposed to as it is hallucinated. And I don't think scripting, I think much of scripting can be simple if you understand the tools, if you subscribe to the newsletter and, compose a script of logical blocks in an appropriate sequence. How's that for controversial?
All right. Now I can stop the recording?
Yeah,
sure.
Please.
Well, I will give you I will give you another analogy that I came up with the other day. Is that, have you ever hired a developer that was the wrong one?
I've seen smart developers do reckless things.
So my point is that my early iteration or my early work in AI and FileMaker prove that a lot of the models are not good at it. Some of them are really terrible at it. And then the other thing is that I was expecting it. Somebody gave it to me like this. AI has all of the knowledge, right? And what I want to know about is just this and that little hole. So if I don't say, only look in that hole, and what the hole is for me is every script step in documentation, everything from MBS, everything everybody's written on the internet about how to do certain things that I could find and that I like. And I built that all into my own library. And now it doesn't hallucinate. It never does, actually. It's pretty cool.
Well, a lot of, just for the lively conversation here, a lot of what is written about FileMaker, and I'm only talking about the pre-David Head era, but a lot of what is posted on the internet that is consumed is bad code. And I know this is true because I know there's a lot of bad code out there because I personally have written bad code.
No.
I didn't quote you.
Tell me it's not true.
No, anyway, so yeah, I mean, AI, it really doesn't think up new things. Like, in other words, if you look at what the humans in the FileMaker community have done, from time to time, they've come up with improvements.
But I don't think it's comparing AI to humans. I think it's more like we know humans are better.
So why do we call artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's totally wrong.
Artificial intelligence.
I call mine Claude.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and that's an effort. It's all very clever marketing. You got to give them that because it's got names like, Claude, my buddy Claude. Let's see, what else can I criticize about AI? Let's see. So it pukes. We use the word
as long as we're recording all of this.
They're going to come back and get you, Tony.
It is. It's just a tool, and I think for the FileMaker community, it is new and shiny. I'll give you that. And if new and shiny is your thing, play with the new shiny thing. Just I don't think you want to throw away the basics of solid FileMaker development, which is understanding the platform and not hallucinating about it and not spending hours. David Head's story, because I read all his posts except for the last one that shipped today. It's like he spent a significant amount of time attempting to educate Google Gemini about how the FileMaker platform worked. You ought to send them a bill, an invoice.
Yeah. Free. That's what we get for free right now.
Gemini was confidently standing its ground.
I've got a whole bunch of that argument that I haven't put into stuff yet, but that's we had the argument about it all, and eventually Gemini came back to me and said, "I'm a people pleaser." That's basically the way I've been built. I'm a people pleaser. So when you ask me a question, I will give you an answer that will please you, and that will look like something that is the right answer. And that's really what it all comes down to.
Grok does the same.
It's having psychosis.
I'm heavily invested in Grok, and I get the same thing all the time. What Matthew was saying a moment ago about setting all these parameters for it, I picture it like fencing it in, like if you adopted an unruly child, I imagine you got to teach it all the rules of the household, like don't go play in the street, don't mess with mama's skirt, don't drop the dishes, on and on and on. If you can figure out every possible parameter what might go astray, then you can get solid results. But you have to know what those rules are that it might not observe. And right there, that's a whole library of knowledge to knowing just how to fence it in at this point. Now that may change over time as it gets more, I don't want to say intelligent, knowledgeable.
So if you give it the correct answer, it'll get the correct answer.
Yeah, right. The answer is white. What's the color? Sorry, Matthew.
I'm sorry, I was going to say AI can do it for you. Like I have a number of commands that I issue at the end of every thread.
Cool.
For it to look at everything it learned from, anything that, it could commit to my functional database of all of my knowledge about how I develop software. So every single thread, I have it write all of those things and correct the ones that maybe were wrong.
Do you have to paste that into the prompt or something? How do you do that?
I programmed it to do it.
There's if we turn off the recording, we can get into some deeper topics.
All
Please.
right. Here we go.